Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Forests are different things to different people. For some, a forest is a tranquil place for aesthetic enjoyment. To others, a forest provides recreational or hunting experiences. A forest is also a resource for firewood and wood products. Forests are all these things and much more. They're complex ecosystems that provide public benefits like clean air and water, along with diverse wildlife and plant habitat. So with all that, it's probably not surprising that two Vermont colleges are working together to provide students with a comprehensive forestry education. Keith Silva tells us more.
It doesn't get much more hands-on than this. Bring a pen and paper, sure, but don't forget your axe, chainsaw, and ear protection, because it gets loud. Graham Leitner is the instructor for timber harvesting at Vermont Tech.
In timber harvesting, we start out with basics of forest management and silviculture, and then we're teaching the students on how to go out in the woods and evaluate a woodland for the potential of timber harvesting, and then we're doing quite a bit of work with logging safety and finishing up the semester with water quality and some forest mapping.
You look up and identify hazards.
Leitner has brought in Dave Birdsall from Northeast Woodland Training to teach the game of logging, a world-recognized training curriculum for chainsaw skills. This is Kristen Skoda's first college course, one first of many for this 19-year-old.
It was the first time I ever used a chainsaw. It was what I expected it to be like. It's a little intimidating, but not bad.
Besides how to safely use a chainsaw, Skoda's also learning how much work goes into working the woods.
The different harvesting systems are really cool, how many different ways you can get wood out of the forest, and how much more goes into it than just cutting down a tree and getting some boards out of it. How much more goes into managing the forest, like for wildlife and just for recreational use. That's something I've found really interesting.
Nothing quite like the smell of the gas when you rev up the engine.
Charlie Young sees timber harvesting as more than a college course. It's a way of life.
When I get older, I want a large piece of land and property for myself, and I'm going to need firewood if I have a wood stove or something, and also land management. So using this, I can effectively, or more effectively, take care of my future, I guess.
The forestry major at Vermont Tech is a 2-year degree. While this fulfills a requirement to get a Vermont forestry license and is ideal for some students, administrators wanted to go further, so they reached out to another state school.
We designed this Associates in Forestry degree in collaboration with UVM.
Molly Willard manages Vermont Tech's Institute for Applied Agriculture and Food Systems.
Students could do their first 2 years here, and then they can either walk away with a technical associate's degree in forestry, or they can go on seamlessly to UVM into their junior year to acquire a Bachelor's of Science in Forestry.
This developing partnership between UVM and Vermont Tech is a win-win for students and educators.
It's nice for VTC and UVM to collaborate on educational curriculums like this, because I think both institutions bring a different set of expertise. So VTC really focuses on applied, tangible, technical education, and so our timber harvesting course very much is doing is focused on that. And then to go on to UVM, they're able to be really introduced to more faculty, a wider breadth of knowledge in terms of forest ecology, and then also research.
When he's not teaching, Leitner owns and operates Vermont Greenwood, a logging and timber harvesting business focused on sustainable forestry. He hires employees whose people skills match their knowledge of forestry.
90% of my employees have actually been formally trained in forestry, and I believe that timber harvesting in the modern world on smaller ownerships, small private woodlands owned by predominantly working families, really requires a greater level of expertise to be able to manage personal relationships on your job sites, to be able to do sustainable work in the woods, and to just make forestry a more well-respected and sustainable profession.
Very, very nice.
Felling trees requires concentration, patience, and tenacity. Skills Skoda and Young know they'll need to continue their education and build a career.
Thought about careers a lot, but as far as this, it's absolutely crucial if you want to advance your position, and especially being a forester or logger. Obviously, this program is set up so that you get hands-on experience, so that when you eventually go into the workforce, you're not just standing out there with your head spinning around. You know what to do and how to do it, and it just makes you more prepared for entering the workforce.
What do you think?
I really like steps, so that okay, when I'm doing this, this is what I have to remember. Right now, I'm kind of focusing on the hands-on stuff, but I have been thinking about different careers to go with forestry, and maybe just this class, where I could take it.
Thanks to Vermont Tech and UVM, the next step for these students is sure to make them a cut above. In Randolph Center, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
And joining me now is the director of the forestry program at the University of Vermont, Dr. Tony D'Amato. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
What a great connection between Vermont Technical College and UVM. That's working well, it seems?
Yeah, we're really thrilled about this partnership, and so coming in the upcoming academic year, this will be formalized as a partnership, so students that are currently at Vermont Technical College can transfer into UVM in fall 2020 and join our Bachelor of Science forestry program.
Terrific. It's great to see so many women in here. There's a greater demand for forestry professionals today, or is there? Given the challenge of climate change and invasive species, is it a happening?
It is, and if you talk to any person that's been in the profession for a long time, many would say they wish they were graduating right now, just given the number of jobs. And the reason for those jobs is really twofold. One, certainly are these challenges that are facing us, both with invasive species, with fire out west, globally, dealing with issues of equity and deforestation. How do we sustain these areas across the globe? But also I think people are becoming more aware of how forests really are this key element in our landscape that gives us more than just wood, clean water, carbon, wildlife. And so there's many ways we can get into forestry, and there's also many ways that folks can get employed and actually work as forest stewards. And so as an example, Vermont Land Trust has foresters on their staff, which 20 years ago you may not have seen a non-government organization with foresters working for them.
Sure, and so important certainly here. So what is forestry education like today as compared to a decade or two ago?
Yeah, and as a product of forestry education a couple decades ago, there's elements that were maybe viewed as new ideas, but historically we really focused on the forest as a collection of trees, and those trees were largely managed for either forest products, or if we thought about wildlife, it was game species like deer or grouse. And really the shift has been towards forest ecosystems, really understanding how those forests work, learning everything about them, from the microbes to the birds to the bats and bees that exist there, and also understanding how they fit into both things like water quality, carbon, so that when we're managing forests and we're doing things like producing local wood products or other activities, we understand those impacts and also can design strategies that address things like climate change, invasive species impacts, as well as be part of climate mitigation strategies.
Wow, so it's much more than just logging. I mean, does forestry still have an image problem around that?
Absolutely, and I think people see a tree cut and it's certainly a tool that we use as part of forestry, but I always say that forest is a big part of the word forestry. Really what we're doing is managing and conserving forests. And so if we want wildlife habitat, occasionally trees are harvested to create diversity and structure. Likewise, if we're looking for forest products, certainly we have to harvest, but it's one of our tools, and really it's critical to understand what it takes to cut trees, just because you're going to be making prescriptions, asking a logger to do that. Also understanding what it takes for them to run their own business, because it's very expensive, and so recognizing if you want someone to do those operations, you need to be aware of the constraints. But really, it's one facet of a much more interdisciplinary field that really focuses on the forest and how it fits into our society.
And I imagine Vermont would be kind of on the cutting edge of stewardship and sustainability. Is that true?
Yeah, like many things in the environment, Vermont certainly is viewed as a leader, and particularly on the stewardship side, we're really fortunate to have just some amazing foresters in the state, very visionary, very progressive. That starts with some of our leadership in the state, with the Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, but also we just have amazing consultants as well as folks working in other private sectors. I'd say one area that we actually could improve upon is that from a public perspective, there's really a disconnect between where our wood comes from in Vermont, and it's ironic we're such localivores when it comes to food, but nobody really thinks much about where the wood comes from, and ironically the majority of wood consumed by Vermonters comes from elsewhere, whether it's adjacent states or around the globe. And so if we're thinking about kind of how we fit into global conservation, being kind of a localivore as it relates to local wood consumption, is a key aspect of that from just an equity perspective, and just sustaining our working landscapes and those that rely on them.
And that's even firewood coming into the state, and that's why we're finding the emerald ash borer all over the state instead of just coming up from the south because of wood coming in.
Yeah, exactly. As people have said, burn it where you buy it. You want to make sure that you're using local wood. So we certainly are in a global economy. Wood moves all the time around the region, but trying to keep more of that wood in the state, and also just looking at what's the carbon footprint of a log that comes all the way from the northwest to give us timber. It's going to be a lot less of an impact if it's from a local source, and trying to really be a global citizen when it comes to that behavior.
Fantastic. And so how can viewers learn more about forestry at UVM?
So you can go to the website, universityofvermont.edu, uvm.edu. The Rubenstein School is where the forestry program is housed. Also, I'm always happy to talk to anybody interested in forestry, so you can look me up on the website and send me an email or give me a call or come by. I'm always happy to talk to someone that cares about forests.
Fantastic. Forestry education. Tony D'Amato, great to have you in here.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard.